Howdy folks, welcome back to my YouTube. I am your host, the Mighty Bjorn, and here we are today with another episode of Community Steel, kicking off today's episode with a self-propelled gun. This is the FV 576 Demolisher by the Appleman. And it weighs in at 38.6 tons. As I said, it is an SPG armed with a 155 millimeter gun, and that gun actually has 195 millimeters of penetration. This is for the late war period, and this is more or less based on some of the British self-propelled guns that you would get towards the end of World War II and shortly after World War II, getting into the more modern era. It's not a bad SPG. It's not extremely fast, but it does do the trick. It does move around, and when it comes to self-propelled guns, speed doesn't really necessarily matter. Same way with the armor. The armor, as you can see here, it's pretty flat, pretty boxy, and it's actually thin. But once again, it's a self-propelled gun. That doesn't really matter. It's not meant to be in direct contact with enemy forces. So all in all, it does work, and I think the vehicle actually looks rather good in itself, even though the decals, like 2/3 of the decals, didn't load properly. It would have been nice if they did, because he's actually got decals set up on the sides there, on the side skirts, to make it look like rubber mats. Things of that nature, different headlights, tail lights, markers, etc. And it makes it look even more British. But anyway, folks, let's move on to the next one. And the next vehicle I have here is from Nero, and this is his T55. It weighs in at 47.8 tons. It's armed with a 100 millimeter gun like it's supposed to be, and it's got 210 millimeters of penetration. This is for the late war period. The armor is actually quite effective. The gun itself is also quite effective. The only thing I have really to say about this vehicle is, I don't know. I feel the turret is off. The hull feels spot on, but I don't know. The turret seems tall to me. And also, that being said, it's actually got better gun depression than it probably should. But, you know, that's neither here nor there. I mean, Soviet gun depression, you never really expect anything. And this, as I said, probably has better gun depression than it should. Now, when it comes to the turret shaping itself, the placement of the crew hatches, things of that nature, it looks pretty spot on. It just feels taller than it should. I don't know, maybe that's just a me thing. Maybe the scale to me seems off. Everybody's kind of got their own scale on how things should look and be when it comes to Sprocket. And even though we're all, I would say, fairly close together from creator to creator, some of us have different opinions about this scaling in small, minute details. That being said, all in all, the vehicle does perform pretty well, and it's not a bad rendition of a T55. Although there is quite a few out there to compare it to, so yeah, there's that running for it. The next vehicle I have here is the Panther 2 from Heinz Beans Guderian. And Heinz Beans, as I said, has the Panther 2 here. It weighs in at 46 tons. It is armed with the 88 millimeter gun, as it should be, and it's got 171 millimeters of penetration. It is for the late war period, and it's not actually a bad rendition of a Panther 2. The gun is actually quite effective. The armor's decent enough. I mean, I find the Panther, honestly, to be better than the Cane Tiger, mostly in general terms, because it's a smaller tank. It's actually harder to get a good hit on it. Where the Cane Tiger, even though the armor's thicker, it's easier to find those weak points in its armor. Gun depression is pretty good. Mobility is not bad, even though, as you can see here, I'm kind of stuck on a tree, and that's mostly because I'm old and shit, and, well, sprocket mechanics aren't always necessarily the best. Gun depression is rather good. Gun accuracy is superb. That being said, it is a German tank, so you kind of suspect superb gun, or at least that's my opinion. If it's a German tank, it's probably going to have a really good gun compared to many of the other vehicles out there. And yeah, I don't feel this is lackluster in one bit when it comes to the gun. Now, it does have the interweave suspension, as it should. It's not bad. As you can see here, its mobility is not necessarily the greatest. Now, driving in a straight line, it's rather good. Its turning is where it really slows down, but it still works all in all. The next vehicle I have here is the HGS 106 from Her Gunter. And this weighs in at 18 tons. It is armed with a 90 millimeter main gun with 175 millimeters of penetration. This is actually for the mid-war period. And what this is meant to be a tank destroyer, which that's pretty much what it is. Now, I don't know if the turret is fully traversable. I did see actually with the Demolisher, the turret did not fully traverse all the way around, even though I had one. I didn't test it here to see if it would go all the way to the rear. Now, the one thing I really like about this vehicle is he took the time to detail the doors in the rear. The doors would be, even though they're not right now, those doors, as you can see on the side of the rear of that turret, would be closed. So those are basically panels that they would open up to throw shells out of the back, as well as, I don't know, based on the gun breech, it might be actually necessary for the doors to be opened up on a turret this small and a gun this long. Gun depression is not the best. Now, the mobility is rather good. Oh, sorry. Gun depression is really good on this. My bad. So gun depression is really good. Mobility is rather good. It's the armor that's rather poor. Sorry, I'm old and shit, folks. Yes, the armor is... Well, I mean, it's a turretless tank destroyer. I didn't really expect much for armor, especially when you look at it and it's kind of got an open top crew compartment, even though it's got a hard top roof on it. It's kind of got one of those things going that the M36 had. The M36 could actually have a hard top panel type roof. There wasn't many of those kits that were actually put out there, but it could have it. That being said, it's still thin armored open top roof, so it would definitely be susceptible to artillery fire as well as machine guns. Besides the tank destroyers, I have another tank destroyer here, and this one's from Coconut Cooler. This weighs in at 36.5 tons. This is the Struger Emil, and it's, in my opinion, not a bad rendition of the Struger Emil. I've never really took a very close look at the Struger. We'll call it the Emil from now on. I've never took a very close look of the Emil. I know it looks very similar in some cases to the Dicker Max, which that vehicle I'm actually very aware of, even though there wasn't many of those produced, especially when compared to the Emil here. Now, it does have a 128 millimeter main gun with 246 millimeters of penetration. This is for the late war period. Mobility, it's slow. It is really lumbering. Now, it can get up to speed pretty good, especially when you go downhill, but in general terms, it is a lumbering vehicle. It is also open-topped, as you can see here. So it is going to be susceptible to things such as machine gun fire and artillery, and weather elements would be another complaint if you actually had to worry about crew. Armor-wise, what armor? I mean, it's, once again, it's a tank destroyer. It doesn't have armor. The next vehicle here, we have a KA-1 from Rismo. This weighs in at 61 tons. It is armed with a 250 millimeter main gun. And when it comes to being a lumbering behemoth, this is a lumbering behemoth. I don't know what the armor is like. I didn't really test the armor. That being said, it kind of feels and looks more like a self-propelled gun to me. So I pretty much looked at it and figured that armor's a secondary thing, although it does look like it might actually have some decent armor protection. That being said, the gun is direct front only, although it can point up pretty good. It does actually have some very high elevation that it can get. And this is also for the late war period. Now, from what I can tell, this is a totally original design, and I don't think it looks bad. There is some interesting design features that he made, but what makes it interesting is they're design features you wouldn't typically see in a vehicle of this type, or, well, just more or less in general, which actually made me even more interested in this vehicle from Rismo. And the final vehicle I have here today is from Nathan the Dummy, and this is his T72M1. This is the import East German variant of the T72A, and it weighs in at 49.7 tons. It is armed with the 125 millimeter main gun, which actually has modeled, looks fairly close to what it should be. That being said, the 125 millimeter main gun has 231 millimeters of penetration. This thing will cut through stuff. It is for the late war period, obviously, as being a Cold War tank. I like the design of the engine deck. It doesn't look like he messed around too much with Blender or something like that. And doesn't need a ton of decals to run. I actually do appreciate that kind of stuff. That being said, performance-wise, the vehicle's not bad. I mean, it's got no side armor to speak of, which is kind of a problem with the T72. It doesn't have a whole lot in the way of custom decals, but the ones that are there I feel are worth having. Gun depression is not bad, not great either. It's kind of T72-like. Now, when it comes to reversing, it is miserable reversing. But going straight, yeah, it goes pretty good. Turret traverse is rather good. And the thing I can appreciate with this vehicle is it doesn't feel like he really did too much, if any, in the way of file editing to increase reload speed or stats or whatever. It feels like something that he actually took the time to design using actual Sprocket assets. And that's one of those things I feel that should be appreciated, maybe not as appreciated as often as it should be. But anyway, folks, this wrap up today's episode of Community Steel. Hopefully you all enjoyed it. Thank you very much for tuning in, and have yourself a wonderful day.